Welcome back to another powerful episode of the Thrive in Design podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Lashae Hall, CEO and founder of Thrive in Design, where we help interior product companies grow their brand and revenue through human-centered strategy and design. Today, I'm excited to welcome Adam Kubryk and Brooke Taylor, co-founders of Vendor Bootcamp and two seasoned leaders in the hospitality industry who understand exactly what it takes to get specified and stay there. Adam is Director of Sales and Marketing at Global Allies, where he helped grow the company from selling 0 chairs to millions placed in hotels across 50 countries. Over the past 2 decades, he has built brand standard programs with nearly every top hotel brand, negotiated major marketing partnerships with leading trade publications and event organizations, and navigated more than 500 industry events. His expertise in sales strategy, relationship building, and hospitality brand positioning has helped transform Global Allies into a powerhouse in the space. Brooke brings over 20 years of hospitality industry experience spanning interior design, brand strategy, and experience design. As founder of Personified Creative Company and co-founder of Vendor Bootcamp, she combines qualitative market research with strategic brand development to help hospitality vendors clarify their differentiated value and communicate it effectively to designers, operators, and decision makers. Her work centers on helping brands stop competing in the middle and start becoming the sought-after partners they envision. Together through Vendor Bootcamp, Adam and Brooke help hospitality vendors level up their strategy, sharpen their brand story, and better navigate the complex hospitality ecosystem. In today's episode, we're diving into the brand story blueprint, how to pitch to designers and get specified. We'll explore what designers are actually listening for, how to align your brand narrative with buyer priorities, and why storytelling, not just product specs, is the key to long-term specification growth. If you're a hospitality vendor looking to move beyond hustle and into strategic traction, this conversation is packed with insight you won't want to miss. So welcome to the show, Adam and Brooke.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited for it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get into it. Vendor Bootcamp was born from your shared frustration with the industry of conversations that felt disconnected. Was there any specific moment or experience where you just realized like something's missing and we need to support our industry in a much better way?
Yeah, I think, so many of us as vendors feel like these events are designed for our customers, and yet we are the ones paying for them. And so all of the benefits, all of the focus on content is really geared at the design and purchasing and brand and ownership communities. And so there wasn't really a vendor level conversation happening, much like this podcast. There weren't a lot of vendor related podcasts. So just getting that content, getting those thoughts and getting those ideas out there and shared, Brooke and I were together at a specific event and realized there's a real opportunity for vendors to get together for an event that really can help change their business and generate a real meaningful level of ROI beyond just introductions to a new potential customer.
Yeah. And I know you guys have both said that you were tired of hearing those bad questions. Before we dive deep into everything that I have to ask for you today, what are some of the bad questions that you were hearing before you started Vendor Bootcamp?
Well, the initial impetus of Vendor Bootcamp actually happened at a conference during a panel where Adam and I were lamenting that there's so much knowledge in this industry that just isn't getting shared. And instead, we've been in the industry for 23 years now, both of us, and it feels like the same conversations have been happening across those 2+ decades. And it's often like, what are the trends and what's the meaning of luxury and these things that aren't really helping anyone to do better in their business and to leverage all of this amazing knowledge. And so unlike some people, once we decided that we were going to, we weren't just going to complain about it, we were going to do something about it. And so that's how we conceived of Vendor Bootcamp, was kind of out of a frustration of like, there's got to be a better way, that we can do more.
Yeah, and I think I remember saying to Brooke at one point, I have been to more panels about green design than I have been asked by customers what our environmental policy is.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm being asked that question once every several years, and yet I'm going to a panel several times a year on the topic, there's a disconnect there. And I think it was important to understand what are the things that are driving the specification and the purchase orders, and how do we get to conversations about those things?
Yeah. And that's important too, to really look at your audience and see what questions are they actually asking and align your content and your programming around those questions rather than the assumptions. Like what you just shared, Adam. It's the panels were all about green, green and sustainability. Did they just assume that that's what people wanted to hear, or were people asking those questions? So I love that you guys listened to the questions that people were asking, and you're like, listen, we're taking initiative and we're going to go after creating content in a space that we don't see served. So you guys have two different backgrounds. Brooke, you come from deep design background. Adam, you spent years working on the brand and sales side. How do those two perspectives really challenge each other and ultimately shape how you evaluate what actually works in a pitch?
I think they're so important. Just, backing up on how Vendor Bootcamp works, there's a lot of consulting that happens between Brooke and I and our attending companies. And there is a huge section of feedback that comes from this amazing group of advisors who join us to have these anonymous conversations about the vendors. And Brooke and I are able to have these sort of one-on-ones, or rather two-on-ones, with just us and that potential buyer and talking about these companies. And in those conversations, the questions we ask and the approaches we take to the categories are so different because of our backgrounds. And, while I may be thinking of, how would I sell this product if I were this company or in this person's shoes? Brooke is often saying something like, when I specified this in the past, I faced this challenge. Are you facing the same challenge? Have you found ways to overcome it? And is able to think about it as a potential buyer in that category, or someone who was previously purchased in that category. And so those two different perspectives can often get totally different answers. They can often lead to the same place, but they give more information and more context to each of those vendors, and also to the advisory board members to unlock better advice from them. Brooke is able to ask some questions that I simply don't know to ask because I've never been in that position. And so it definitely leads us to better information and better content.
And similarly, when we're doing the consulting portion with the individual companies that are attending, that are, part of each program, Adam and I are very complementary in the way that we're relating to them and the insight that we're bringing to their business. Because obviously Adam, as being on the manufacturer vendor side, he understands how they operate in a way that I don't, from the business point of view and the sales process and all that. Whereas I get to be like the voice of their customer, and I can ask the questions and prod them as to like, have you thought about this, in a way that they typically aren't thinking about. And so it's really nice how our backgrounds complement each other and make for a very holistic conversation, both with the attending companies and with the advisory board members, each in a different way.
And also, Brooke has the eye of a designer and the experience of someone in branding. And so, she is able to analyze a company's marketing and brand and their website and Instagram in this very critical and helpful way, from both like someone who is an expert in how it should look visually, but also someone who knows how it should function from someone who needs to use it. And so there's just a lot of experience that I think we both rely upon from our past that helps guide these conversations that we're having with the vendors and with the advisory board. And like Brooke said, the complementary nature of it, it's not one of these 1 + 1 = 2. It really is like a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. We just are able to level up the quality of info so much because of that difference in background.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot of different types of consulting out there, like general business consulting, and what you guys are doing are super niche. Before we dive deeper, because I want to ask about your advisory board and the work that you're doing there, let's take a step back for a moment and let our audience know how Vendor Bootcamp is structured, what the experience is like for a vendor that is actually coming to your bootcamp. Tell us, break it down for us.
Yeah. So the way that it starts is we do a whole intake process. Like we're getting into these companies' actual business models. Like we want to know what sector of your product is the most profitable. What does your sales team look like? What are the challenges you're facing? What are the types of customers you're trying to get in with? And what do you think is your challenge in connecting with those customers? So like we get very granular in this intake process, and it starts with a really robust questionnaire. And then we do a follow-up call with them to dig deeper into the things that really are the most relevant. So it's starting with this pretty intensive discovery process. And within that, we are also asking them, listen, we're about to talk to 40 to 50 of the industry's top decision makers. If you could ask them questions, what would you want to know? And so we're also taking all of this to not only understand a baseline of where this company is and where they want to be going, but also to help guide the conversations with the advisory board and get the insight that the companies are really looking for. So then we in turn have these individual one-on-one conversations or two-on-one conversations with the advisory board members. And this last one, we had 50. So that was our new record. So 50 individual sessions talking about the companies in the winter program that we just did. And so then we consolidate all of that feedback into a book that is categorized by like stakeholders. So there's a design section, there's a purchasing section, there's an owner section, etc. Brand, we have independent sales reps, we have press and media. Like we're really trying to get a 360 view of these companies from the industry point of view. And as Adam mentioned, it's anonymous. And so we footnote each piece of feedback with a number that relates back to the advisory board list. And so that's a list that is each person's title that has been anonymized so that you can get a good sense of their role and the context that they're bringing to their feedback, but you don't have their name or company. And that's so that they can be super candid.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that you guys have brought together like this advisory board that can share like raw knowledge and critiques for these brands. And then they're able to like take that away in so many different facets of the branding, the marketing, the messaging, and all of those things to make their brand better. So when it comes to those brands versus what the advisory board is saying, I'm sure that the brands and vendors come in thinking with an assumption of like how buyers might be feeling. And that probably differs from what that advisory board might share. So let's talk about that. If you had to describe the current mood of buyers towards vendors heading into 2026 and beyond, how would you characterize it? How does it differ from what those vendors are thinking versus what the advisory board is actually sharing?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think, it is, so a couple of things to note. We switch the advisory board every event based on who the attending companies are. So in the years where we have had, say, case good companies that focus on laminate furniture and 3-star branded hotels, we have focused on those 3-star brands and getting their purchasing and the people who, their purchasing departments and the people who design those brand standards programs. The years that we've had luxury vendors, we have really tried to get luxury buyers as part of our advisory board. And for the attending companies, we have had companies who are about to get into hospitality and have never shown their product. And we've had companies who are trying to get to $1 billion in annual sales. And so there is definitely a wide variety of companies who have joined us for a wide variety of reasons. Some people come in with complete misconceptions about their company, about who they are, about how they're perceived. Look at us, we're a high-end luxury brand, and everyone's like, ugh, no, you're not. You are Definitely not. There are other companies that are very aware of their market perception and are nodding along to a lot of the feedback. Oftentimes, that might be a larger company where the hospitality sales rep or sales leader is quite good, and some executive team above isn't really on the ground and doesn't know a lot of the feedback in hospitality that might be so different than the other segments of the business. So everything is sort of dependent. But one thing I will say is, in general, I think right now, a lot of companies are struggling to differentiate. And if you are struggling to differentiate, then you have a hard time connecting right now. You are finding projects to be difficult. You are struggling to resonate. But if you are able to differentiate, there are plenty of projects out there. There is plenty of business to be done. The market is still positive. The big brands still need to actively renovate. They have a huge section of their portfolios upcoming for renovation. But that being said, if you're not part of those brands, you're certainly going to feel that less. If you're part of those standards programs, you're going to feel it more. Unfortunately, our industry, the answer is quite often, it depends. And when, someone comes up to Brooke or I and they're like, oh, here's my problem, what should I do? Well, it depends. And, when that person says, I'm really struggling to get into this brand, and we ask someone from that brand, how would they get into your brand and be successful? Their answer is often, it depends. What it largely depends on is how they're different and how they're differentiated. If it's just price, then if they're the cheapest, quite often that's enough to be in the conversation. But usually it's not. So what is that company doing that is different? And is it different enough for everyone to stop and listen? And if that's the case, those companies are finding everyone's willing to, listen to what your sales pitch is and potentially consider you for a project. And things are good and the market is good and the industry is strong.
Yeah.
And if you're just another blank company who is just doing blank product from blank place like everyone else, then it's hard. Then you're really struggling. And then you're trying to figure out, what do I do right now? How do I get more impact? And that's really tough.
Let's dive deeper into that, Adam, because now you have in your position specifically, you went from the company selling 0 chairs to now it's in hotels all around the world, in brands all around the world. So what was the thing or the brand story that you pulled out to say, this is how we're different? And do you need to reshape that story or retell that story in different ways as the market shifts to continue to differentiate?
That's such a great question. And the answer to it is 25 years old, right? And so the story from then is very different than what the answer is today.
Yeah.
It is also our version of the story. So I would assume that our competitors would have seen the market differently at the time. But we saw an opportunity in our 2 main categories of task chairs and banquet chairs that no one is really providing an elevated product category for hotels in either category. And that stacking chairs look like a commercial product, and that these hotels were really starting to make a much bigger impact on, what it should look like, what the visual should be, what the narrative should be. And that started extending into the meeting space. And they started understanding that a huge chunk of their revenue was coming from meetings. And so some of the bigger brands started putting more and more attention towards it. And that created the opportunity for us to differentiate via product, right? This product doesn't look commercial. Everything else does. And it was similar in task chairs. The other options were office-like product. And hotels wanted to be more residential. That gave us an opportunity to create a more residential style for hotels.
Yeah.
And one benefit that we had compared to our competitors is all of our competitors at that time were just doing offices. So if you wanted to buy this office chair for your hotel, that's fine. But it's designed for an office. That's one person to use, 260 days a year. So our chairs were designed for a hotel. That's for 250 people to use from 1 minute to 1 hour. Totally different mindset and approach. And so we told that story for many years in many different ways. And a lot of it was durability. and warranty. We told it through our marketing. We had a sumo wrestler for many years who was sort of our company mascot. It was one of our absolute beloved ad campaigns. We used to bring him to trade shows, but it helped tell the story of our product is different because it's stronger.
Yeah.
And in the other category, our product is different because it looks better. And, you know, when you are the high end part of the market, you are not trying to capture the bulk of the orders. You're trying to capture the bulk of the high end orders. So we understood that. And we knew we would never be the standard for, you know, a 3-star Holiday Inn Express stacking chair program, but we knew we'd have the chance to be a 4-season standard. And so that was the part of the market that we really focused on.
I love that. Now, on the design side then, Brooke, when you're like working with brands through Vendor Bootcamp and you're consulting, you know, Adam just shared that at Global Allies, they were thinking a lot about like form and function. They were thinking about the durability, the design, and how they were captivating their audience with stories in different ways, whether that's bringing the sumo wrestler to the trade show. I wish I could have seen that, by the way. Bring the sumo wrestler back. I would like to see that at an upcoming trade show.
It's pretty iconic.
Brooke, on your end, what are some things that you're finding that's important for brands to tell that story or share the information, like as a designer is specifying the product?
Yeah. So I bring that. So I was a designer for 16 years before I shifted into brand strategy. And so it is really valuable, of course, to have been the customer of the people who are now my clients. You know, who better to tell you how to connect with your customer than someone who was your customer for a very long time?
Absolutely.
So that is really valuable that I'm able to bring that insight because I know the designer process inside and out at a very granular level. So I can help them to sift through all of the things they could be talking about to really identify what's going to resonate and actually move the needle in terms of making someone want to specify them. And that, of course, as Adam said, it depends. It differs for not even just every company, but even within a given category. So, you know, Adam had the fortune of being able to rely on product in terms of differentiation. What's so interesting about hospitality is that there actually aren't a lot of categories that can do that. Because of the custom nature of it, it really comes down to process, which is much harder to talk about and to differentiate via process. That's really challenging, which is also why, you know, custom case good companies are the most consistent category that we've had at Vendor Bootcamp and the one that we have a waiting list for, because it is such a challenging category to differentiate in. You are not coming out there and saying, hey, look at our product that we designed. You're essentially saying, like, we can make anything you want. So the thing that I really focus on with my clients is, okay, you're in a crowded category and just about anybody can say, we can make whatever you want. So what is it at a very specific niche level that sets you apart? What can you do that nobody can? And I really love digging in with those categories that are hard to differentiate. So to really understand how they're different, because there's always something. There's an approach. There's something about the way they do things that is going to resonate with a particular customer. And it's all about not trying to be everything to everyone. It's really about what is my absolute strongest position? What can I claim? What is my truly differentiated value that matters to my customer? And that's the message that I need to like just broadcast and really lean into, rather than trying to be everything to everyone, because that just doesn't work. You have to really like stake your claim and own it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a relevant statement to really any industry, right?
Absolutely.
Any industry. You cannot serve the masses unless you're Amazon. Unless you're Amazon, Walmart, or like, I don't know, Sam's Club or something like that.
There is one other thing I will add that I think Brooke is able to do because of her sort of connection between understanding the vendor approach, but also being on the design side for so many years. And that is that there's a lot of education about how a design firm works or how some of these other firms work and make money. and what their time is worth. And Brooke will often talk about how she was tracking time to the nearest 15 minutes as a designer and the constant time pressure she was under. And therefore, you as the vendor should consider X, Y, Z, right? And therefore, you should make your marketing materials look like this. And your website should have this functionality to it because of the time pressure, right? And so I think a lot of times it's easy to sort of say, get a better website, improve your marketing, improve your outreach. But I think understanding the why behind it and what you're really accomplishing by taking that off of someone's plate, understanding that is sort of a superpower. And so when Brooke is able to get her vendors or our vendors to understand some of those subtleties of, hey, you're, having so much fun as an art company playing art with a designer, and that designer is going broke choosing the art with you because they are it's a black hole of hours, billable hours. And, they have 6 people working on it because you're all having so much fun choosing the art. So that's great. Play art, but do it quickly. Yeah. And so, that context really makes a big difference.
Yeah. And that just reminded me, I just had this flashback of when I was a sales rep in New York, working for Core Seal, and going into hospitality firms, they're like, okay, we have 15 minutes. Yep. This is what we need to accomplish. And I just would play the role of okay, I'm a part of your design team at this point. We're not doing the sales pitch. We're just working on your project. and I used to love those moments. Okay, so I know you guys said it depends for every one of your vendors. But before we get into the end of this episode, I wanna pull some tactical things that people can walk away with. So whether it's messaging, materials, approach, give us something that can be applied to a company that might be listening right now. They want to get into hospitality. They need some quick facts. You don't know anything about them. Just give us maybe some general knowledge that you might see showing up across the board of all of your clients that are coming to Vendor Bootcamp.
I've got one. Stop selling to designers.
Stop selling. Okay.
Stop selling to designers because designers are not your buyer.
Okay.
Think of designers as an extension of your sales team. Because when you are selling to the designer to try to influence their decision, they in turn have to go sell that decision to the actual decision maker. Whether that's the client, the purchasing agent, the brand, all of those other people that are stakeholders in the process, the designer has to be the messenger of that. So keep in mind that the designer is not the end-all be-all decision. Equip them the way you would a sales team with the information so that they can sell that decision up to the rest of the team.
Yeah. Okay.
So mindset shift.
Okay. And that's a big mindset shift.
Oh,
for
yeah.
a lot of brands.
I think it's such valuable feedback too, in terms of, we are often told that vendors don't understand the dynamic that is happening in the decision-making process between an owner, a brand, a purchasing agent, and a design firm. And how that design firm or that purchasing agent who has just been fighting you and fighting you and fighting you is suddenly going, these guys are so great. That's why we picked them, right? And here's why this product is so awesome and it's going to be so perfect for your property. And so we don't always get to see that side. And so I think that's such a great point Brooke had. I think for me, the first one that comes to mind, and it's really how Vendor Bootcamp starts, is understand where your product category affects either the ROI or the overall cost structure of that asset. Because it's all really pretty and everyone's making it look as lovely as possible. But at the end of the day, this thing is an Excel spreadsheet for some very wealthy owner or REIT. Mm-hmm. And it is our job as partners in this asset to increase the value. And some of us do it in different ways. Some of us do it by making everything look prettier and getting more people to want to be there. And some of us do it by having product that brings in revenue. And some of us do it by having product that doesn't fail or product that delivers on time and as expected without, any delays or unexpected overages. All of those are things that greatly affect the value of an asset.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand where your product or product category fits in there, then you're just selling something.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But we recently had a company who was just selling a product. When they made the switch to, hey, this is how much revenue your product can bring in for that hotel is not expecting to make that revenue without your product. With your product, revenue. Like that, there are people who do not care what it looks like in that conversation. They are in based on numbers, and those are wonderful clients to have. And so understand where in the real part of the process you are. At the top of the food chain, you still fit in somewhere. And so kind of understand that.
Yeah, I love that. And Brooke, when you said don't sell to designers, we on the podcast, I actually talk a lot about like what that might look like, because I feel like as I've seen it and looked at the customer journey and experience of a designer with a vendor, really the selling part might happen in like the awareness stage. Like that designer is just, looking for inspiration, and they might be coming across these brands online or at a trade show. That might be the selling portion of telling your brand story in different ways. With the sumo wrestler, for example, you're just capturing their attention. But once you have their attention, like you said, Brooke, you're equipping them with the right information and the tools that they need to then go sell your brand to the actual end user or the ownership of the hotel, etc. So
Absolutely.
yeah, the
I think
sales
I
is
see
different.
it like a really good example is art. A lot
Yeah.
of art companies talk like wax poetic about the art itself.
Mm-hmm.
That is great if you're talking to the end user. But when you are talking to a designer, even in your marketing and sales materials, that's actually not the right message. You need to be talking about the art as to how it is supporting the narrative that the designer has put together and how it is, how it's contributing to the identity of the property and all of those things versus this art is amazing. Of course, the art is phenomenally inspirational and gorgeous. But when you're talking to a designer, honestly, almost anyone in that stakeholder process of specification, purchasing, etc., you have to be thinking more of like, how is this a solution? We
Yeah.
need to talk about art as a project solution, not as a precious thing in and of itself.
Yeah. And that really goes along with messaging in general, right?
Yes.
Marketing messaging should go to speak to what your audience needs to hear or the language that they're already speaking, right?
But we will also see our company say something like, well, we don't call on purchasing agents because they're not the ones picking the art company. And then we'll hear purchasing agents say, well, some art consultants will send us like a really helpful installation guide and book that has all the specifications. And, there are 5 different ways that they can be helpful to our process. And they also let me know, oh, if you're in a jam, I can do this and this and this in 4 weeks. And by the way, if you ever need to cover a really large area, we have this solution. Well, who do you think that purchasing agent is recommending in that kickoff call when someone says, what are we thinking for art? So yeah, you don't have to call on these people, but if you're helpful and you have solutions for them, they are going to remember you. And so, it's like Brooke was saying, it's the solution to the process, right? So the thing you are able to create is a part of it. The process that gets you there is a part of it. But having those solutions to their problems definitely gets you to the top of the pile.
Yeah, and having the solutions for all the stakeholders in the hospitality process, because there's so many. There's the
And
designers.
they're very different. Their
Very
problems are very different. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Before we come to a close, there's one important topic that I want to talk about and I want to get your feedback on, and it's AI. AI is shaping so many industries in so many different ways. I know I've been testing out so many tools, and I even saw a hospitality AI survey yesterday on LinkedIn. But AI is a tool. It's not necessarily a strategy. And I would love to hear where you both have seen AI genuinely improve the outcomes for your vendors, and where does it dilute outcomes?
Yeah. I'm happy to chat about how we're using it as global allies. And we did use it as Vendor Bootcamp as well to help manage the massive amount of transcripts and content. So there are obviously some ways when you're analyzing huge chunks of data that it's very helpful. We as global allies have used it in a handful of ways. We are improving factory photos. I've always hated sending photos from the factory. They always choose the worst possible fabric. It's in front of a terrible brick wall with some ivy growing on it. I mean, it is just so bad. And so finding which model can not only put that product in what looks like a studio shoot, but also say, show me a profile and a back 3/4 of this product that, it can generate those images with certainly enough accuracy for us to pass along. And so that has been a very useful type way of using it. But we are now creating a lot of tools using AI, and particularly Claude Cowork, where our team has a sort of internal dashboard, and it allows us to generate a quote in a couple minutes in what used to be a manual process. When we receive a purchase order, we are now analyzing it using AI and using that to generate our initial invoice. We're also using it to be able to upload invoices and run reports off of those, be it which of our chairs is most popular, right? Which allows us to adjust how we're marketing and what we're promoting. It also allows us to easily do things like commission reports, which previously were a lot of time to put together. What's really interesting is it probably took as much time to create the module that generates commission reports as it did to run 1 month's commission report. So in 15 minutes, that module was up and created. And it probably took 15 minutes to do December commissions. Yeah. And so, for us, we're using it as tools to look at what actions do we repeat and how can we eliminate a lot of the friction of creating those things. Yeah. And if that's the case, we now add it to our little internal dashboard. And I will say we have a very simple process, but I do know of companies with more complex processes, like custom case good companies, who are using AI to analyze specs and analyze bid packages and analyze POs and try and catch errors before product ship. And I know the brands and ownership groups are starting to use it more and more for how they review either design documentation or, final bid packages. So it's certainly coming. If you're not using it, I don't think your company is going to go away. I just think you're going to do stuff a lot slower than everyone else. Yeah. And for most companies, speed is really important. It's more important in how you show it to the customer than anywhere else. But we're using it because we're going to dedicate those man hours to somewhere else. Maybe it's more sales opportunities. Maybe it's a better back of house system. But instead of spending a couple hours a month doing this, we're going to set it up for a couple hours one time and then spend those hours elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, time is money.
Absolutely. One of my favorite or most memorable insights from this last session with our advisory board was a design director telling us about how their designers are using AI. And so there's the really interesting things that Adam's talking about in terms of internal processes, and then it's understanding how your customers are using it. And what these younger designers are doing, because in order to enable their AI search, they're taking an image that they really like, let's say a concept image, they're putting it into an agent to have the agent describe it, and then using that description to then search for more. So rather than just doing a reverse image search to try to find images like that, they're doing this extra step to basically make AI search for itself, or make AI search the way it would search. And that is so fascinating to me and has some pretty serious implications for how vendors are showing up in that end search. What are you doing? Because I'm sure these young designers in this one company we talked to are not the only ones doing this. And
Absolutely.
they certainly won't be for long. So it's another consideration of if that's how it's being used, if that's how specifiers are finding imagery and product, are you showing up? And how are you showing up within those?
I literally joined the wait list for ChatGPT advertising after that advisory board session. I was like,
I'm about to go join right now.
we need to be coming up when someone searches what is the best stackable chair.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually did a demo with a custom GPT for designers a few months ago. And there were some vendors that actually came up in the search based on what you're saying, Brooke, and like this, not reverse image search, but almost like reverse
Yeah.
text
Yeah.
prompt search. And all the vendors were like, oh my gosh, how do we show up in that result? We're not there, but
Yeah.
we could be, because that's what what they're looking for is what we had. So yeah, though that's a whole different episode, and
For sure.
we won't go down the rabbit hole of that. But you guys have shared some really good gems and knowledge during this episode. So after everything you've seen through Vendor Bootcamp, what is one deeply held belief vendors need to unlearn if they want to remain relevant, trusted, and specified for the next few years?
Ooh.
I would say that you're showing too much, and it's worse than you think. You don't look as good as you think you look. And you think, oh, I have to show this because no one has seen that version of that chair with that handle on our website. And I have to show all 297 variations. And if I don't, someone's missing out. And instead someone sees that and goes, ugh, that's ugly. And therefore this company is ugly. They don't look at it and go, oh, their 297th variation is not for me. And so we always talk about, I mean, if you summed up all of the feedback into 2 words, it'd probably be say less.
I love it.
Show your absolute best stuff. And, we talk about it all the time, but the very, very first advisory board session we had, one of our advisory board members said that a website was so ugly that if one of their juniors brought it to them, they would consider firing that junior designer.
Oh, no.
And so, like your website your marketing could be so terrible that just recommending it could cost someone their job. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but you have to unlearn that it visually is sufficient. It's not. It's a very visually critical industry. If someone's asking you for, a custom sample and they need to see an image quickly, sure. But if you are marketing something, if you are adding something to your website, if you are showing something to a designer as part of a sales pitch, these are people who were paid because they are visually critical. They are going to immediately be visually critical within the first blink of an eye. And so you have to understand that as a vendor, and you've got to just get rid of all that other stuff.
Yeah. And in short, basically say less and like look good. Say less, look good.
Yeah, sum it up in 4 words right there. Yep.
How about you, Brooke?
I would say that your process matters more than you think it does. And this is from not just like getting re-specified, but even in terms of your brand perception is everything that you do. All the intentional stuff like your social media and your email campaigns, and all the unintentional stuff like your customer service person and your quote process and your sampling. Like all of these things really matter. And if you're only paying attention to the outward facing things, that's doing you a disservice, because people are going to judge you really based on the end of the process. Yeah, that's what's going to be most fresh in their minds. And you want them to have a consistent, good experience across all of it, not just that your marketing looks great and that your social media is engaging. Like they're going to remember that the submittal process was painful, and that's what's going to keep them from specifying you again.
Absolutely. The execution of the sale is going to get them coming back again and again and again. Well, Brooke, Adam, you guys shared so many good things during this episode, and I truly am thankful for you being a part of Thrive and Design podcast. If anybody would like to learn more about Vendor Bootcamp or connect with you, where should they find you guys online?
We're both on LinkedIn, Brooke Taylor and Adam Kubryk, and our website is vendorbootcamp.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. We really appreciate it, Nicole. This was awesome.
Absolutely.